देखिए वो कल वाला यूआरएल काम करता है क्या? इट सेज यू आर लाइव। ये आर यू श्योर नहीं शो हो रहा? मेरे को दिख रहा है। ओह, ओके। ये दिख तो कल वाला ही रहा है, बट लेट मी कॉपी इट अगेन। हाँ, एक सेकंड। ओके, मैं आपको भेजता हूँ बिकॉज आई एम लाइव एट द मोमेंट, so let me send you the email again. मैंने भेज दिया। लुक्स लाइक उसने नया वो जनरेट कर दिया था। हाँ भैया, मिल गया आपको? हाँ, मिल गया आपको? हाँ, नहीं नहीं, सॉरी, आशुतोष, आपको हाँ, ओके। हाँ, या एक सेकंड। अब डू यू सी दी आशुतोष, एक सेकंड होल्ड करें जरा। निपुण, अब दिख रहा है? पावर पॉइंट, या पावर पॉइंट दिख रहा है? आशुतोष, डू यू सी दी पावर पॉइंट? हाँ, मैं भेज चुका हूँ आपको, ईमेल कर दिया। हाँ, Yeah, PowerPoint current challenges, PowerPoint में हाँ फिर इसका मतलब हाँ 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 पर पेज इज करंट challenges ना। तो अब जैसे अब मैंने चेंज किया है नेक्स्ट वन, सो इट शुड नाउ से एनएसए चीफ। हाँ चेंज किया। नाउ डज इट से एनएसए चीफ? हाँ ओके। हाँ हाँ एक सेकंड होल्ड करो। हाँ बोलो। हाँ ओके। हाँ हाँ मैं कर रहा हूँ, गूगल मीट पे जा रहा हूँ। हाँ एक मिनट, अब दैट वुड बी द नेक्स्ट स्टेज। आपकी ईमेल अभी आई नहीं है मेरे पास। हाँ बिकॉज नहीं तो व्हाट्सएप से मैं उस पे फिर अपने को ईमेल करके वो करूँगा। ओके, जैसे ही आता है तो मैं आपको फिर। हाँ एक सेकंड। हाँ आ गया। ओके, आप यू हैव टू लेट मी इन। आशुतोष, यू हैव टू लेट मी इन। हाँ मैंने भेज दिया है, आप यू हैव टू लेट मी इन। निपुण आ रही ऑनलाइन। मेरी कॉल उन्होंने डिनाई कर दी रिक्वेस्ट। उन्होंने डिनाई कर दी रिक्वेस्ट। हाँ बोलिए। हाँ बोलिए। ओके।
वेलकम सर।
ओह वेलकम, थैंक यू।
अरे
या
कामनी मैम जी जी करा चुके हैं जी। जी सर जी सर। जरा अपना यूट्यूब देखो, चैनल मैंने भेजा, सबको शेयर कर दो। यूट्यूब और फेसबुक चैनल जो मैंने भेजे हैं अभी व्हाट्सएप पर। ठीक 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 है सर। कामनी मैम शेयर कर दीजिए सबको। जी सर जी जी।
so we are set then. Oh, welcome. Thank you. We are live, by the way. So should I stop streaming?
सारा
Live, by the way. So should I stop streaming?
सर की स्लाइड चल रही है यूट्यूब पे।
We are live, by the way. So should I stop streaming?
हेलो।
Yeah.
जी जी। हाँ मैं बोल रही हूँ सर की स्लाइड चल रही है यूट्यूब पर। अच्छा यूट्यूब पे, ओके ओके ओके। तो मैं एडमिट कर लूँ सबको फिर? कामिनी 4:45 कितना बज रहा है? 37 हो रहा है। अभी 4:40 4:50 बोला मैंने। लेकिन जो दो ये है ना, ये दोनों लिंक है फेसबुक का यूट्यूब का। हाँ मैंने दोनों भेजे हैं। भेज दिए कर तो दिया सभी से। मैंने देखो कामिनी तो मेरे को मैसेज किया है। पर्सनल हाँ है। ओके अच्छा ठीक है बिल्कुल डन। तो सर हेलो हेलो मुझे मैम किसी को आवाज आ रही है मेरी? जी आ रही है मैडम, आ रही है। हम ये कह रहे थे कि वो स्क्रीन कौन शेयर करेगा? वो नहीं बस हम लोग उसी में है, सेमिनार में ही है। आप बताइए। आशुतोष सर ब्राउजर कौन करेगा? ब्राउजर सर ने बोला था ना आशुतोष सर। नहीं याद दिला दूं मैं इसको। आवाज नहीं आ रही आशुतोष सर, अनम्यूट करिए खुद को। आशुतोष सर म्यूट है आप। हेलो हेलो जी 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 सर। हाँ सर इको आ रही है। अच्छा तब किया था, चलो हो गया। हेलो हाँ सर। सर सर रस्तगी सर।
हाँ बोलिए।
सर अनम्यूट करिए रस्तगी सर, आप अपने आप को अनम्यूट करिए, म्यूट है आप।
मेरा तो म्यूट ही है।
आशुतोष सर सर म्यूट है, आवाज नहीं आ रही ऊपर। बोलेंगे तो खुद ही हम थोड़ी बोल सकते हैं।
अब मैंने, मेरा म्यूट नहीं था, मैंने अब अनम्यूट किया है, मेरा म्यूट था।
हाँ सर मैं ये कह रहा हूँ ना, ये आप मीटिंग में आ गए हैं, ये जो आप जो शेयर कर रहे हैं प्रेजेंट वाला हटाकर आप अपनी स्क्रीन को जाने दीजिए। अभी आपने प्रेजेंट वाला लगा रखा है, उसको हटा दीजिए।
ओके।
ये प्रेजेंट नाउ करके आपने प्रेजेंट कर रखा है, ये बाद में करिएगा जब आपका लेक्चर होगा।
तो मैं एक सेकंड।
अरे वो यूट्यूब और वो फेसबुक वाले शेयर कर दिए गए, कर दिए शेयर। हाँ यस करेक्ट सर नाउ इट्स करेक्ट।
ओके।
रस्तगी सर।
हाँ
हाँ इट्स करेक्ट नाउ।
ओके।
And when you will start your presentation, then sir,
हाँ भाई।
when you will start your presentation, then you will press present now. Then the PowerPoint presentation will come.
हाँ नहीं, ये कहाँ से करूँगा प्रेजेंट नाउ?
ये लैपटॉप में देखिए, राइट हैंड साइड में नीचे लिखा होगा प्रेजेंट नाउ। इसी मीटिंग के इसमें टैब में देखिए, मीटिंग के टैब में ना नीचे।
ओके ठीक है।
प्रेजेंट नाउ लिखा है।
हाँ
Then you will start presenting and you will share your whole screen or the window of the screen.
ओके
Window means in one window the presentation will be there and one window you will be there at the screen.
ओके
Okay.
गॉट इट।
So now it's but now it's coming. I just setting हटा दीजिए सर अभी YouTube पे। हाँ बस now it is correct. इसको ऐसे से छोड़ दीजिए बस।
ओके।
Yes now. आशुतोष सर ये जो लिंक आया है, हेलो आशुतोष सर जो YouTube का लिंक भेजा है उसमें टेस्ट 13 जून लिखा, वही लिंक है सेम ना? हाँ सेम भेज दीजिए, बिल्कुल ऐसे। टेलीग्राम पे नहीं था मैंने। हाँ और फेसबुक पेज का भी है। मुकेश जी। जी सर जी। आप फेसबुक पेज पर देख रहे हो ना? जी फेसबुक पे सही चल रहा है सर, लाइव चल रहा है। बहुत बढ़िया। और हमारा यूट्यूब पे भी लाइव चल रहा है। सभी लोग जो है भगवान का नाम लेके शुरुआत करने की शुरुआत करें, हम कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है। जी ऋषि मैम आप अपना जरा वीडियो ऑन करिए, देखें आप बैठी है कि नहीं बैठी है। सर अटेंडेंस सिक्योर कर रहे हैं मैम। प्रेजेंट सर अब प्रेजेंट हो गया सर, फिर से प्रेजेंट हो गया, देखिए। मुकेश सर जी मैम। मैं दिख रही हूँ ना मेरा फेस? ठीक है रस्तगी सर।
हाँ हाँ
ये फिर से वही हो गया।
हाँ नहीं, मैं वही चेक कर रहा था कि ठीक है कि नहीं है।
अच्छा तो मैम आप कैसे बैठी हैं? ये कुछ सही पोजीशन नहीं है।
अब मैंने कैंसिल कर दिया।
ओके हाँ यस नहीं अच्छा अभी आया नहीं है। Now it's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Now इन करना शुरू कर दीजिए कामिनी मैम। ठीक है। अब चेहरा दिख रहा है किसका? मेरा अब सही अंधेरा हो रहा है ना, लाइट नहीं आ रही होगी ना इसलिए ये लाइट आए बाहर। शक्तिमान कहाँ आ रहा है अंधेरा हो। एक मिनट कामिनी मैम, अब सभी लोग एक मिनट इन हो रहे हैं सब लोग। अब इनफॉर्मल नहीं होना चाहिए, फॉर्मली होना चाहिए। यस अभी मैं इसलिए एक्सेप्ट नहीं कर रही किसी को। थोड़ा रुक जाओ 5 मिनट। हाँ 4:50 का टाइम है, 4 मिनट्स मोर। मुझे सर दो जगह से ज्वाइन है। मैं मोबाइल बंद करके दूसरी जगह मोबाइल बंद करके इको हो रहा है, इको ऐसे बंद करो। हाँ मैंने 2 जगह से सही है ना, इसलिए ऐसा हो रहा है इको प्रॉब्लम। यूट्यूब चैनल बिल्कुल ठीक चल रहा है सर। वाजपेयी सर कब जुड़ेंगे सर? रस्ते की सर की मेहनत जो है काम लाई आ रहा है।
नहीं, it's your effort, man.
बिल्कुल सर। इधर फेसबुक पेज मैंने पकड़ लिया, इधर आपने पकड़ लिया, तो चल रहा है।
Yeah, no, it's nice.
मैं ज्वाइन करना शुरू करूँ? 2-4 मिनट और रुक जाइए, 2-4 मिनट और क्या है। ठीक है, वाजपेयी सर कितने बजे इन होंगे? वाजपेयी सर वो 5:30 बजे करीब होंगे। 5:30। शास्त्री सर प्रणाम।
नमस्कार जी, नमस्कार।
प्रणाम सर।
प्रणाम।
जब ये स्टार्ट आप इन करेंगे तो चैट बॉक्स में दोनों चैनल का वो यूट्यूब और फेसबुक का वो डाल दिया लिंक।
ओके।
इफ यू आर नॉट गेटिंग एंट्री हियर, नहीं सर आप रहने दीजिए, मैं ये इनको बता रहा हूँ, यहाँ पर बता रहा हूँ। कामिनी मैम आप चैट पर डाल दीजिएगा दोनों कॉपी करके। इसमें ये लिख दीजिएगा कि यू आर नॉट गेटिंग एंट्री गूगल मीट, और गूगल मीट में 50-60 से ज्यादा मत करिए। ठीक है। ये कहाँ से आवाज प्रॉब्लम कर रही है?
Is it better now?
This is your YouTube channel.
Oh, thank you.
This is your YouTube channel. तो सर अब अपना ना अब मैं इन करने जा रही हूँ, जरा ब्रोशर लगा दीजिए अपना इस पे। ब्रोशर में लगा देता हूँ, प्रेजेंट नाउ करना पड़ेगा लेकिन ब्रोशर में कर दीजिए। आप इन करो। हेलो हाँ बताओ क्या हुआ, नहीं ऐड हो गया क्या? अच्छा ठीक इन करना शुरू कर दीजिए आप, लेकिन 50 के ऊपर मत करिएगा, 50 करिए मत केवल इसमें। क्यों हो तो जाते हैं, 180 कर लेंगे, 50 कम। यार मैडम उनको यहाँ पर ना जितना ज्यादा जोड़ोगे बैंडविड्थ उतनी कम होती है, उतना ही फिर क्वालिटी डाउन जाने शुरू होगी। इसलिए जो है उनको यूट्यूब पर देखने दीजिए। ओके सर ज्वाइन करने जा रही हूँ। गुड लक सभी को। Shobhit joined. Vimal Khan joined. Deepa Gangwar. मुकेश जी, मुकेश जी, जी सर, आप एक वंदना कर दीजिए तब तक। जी सर, एक वंदना कर दीजिएगा तब तक। अच्छा अच्छा, हाँ 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 बिल्कुल बिल्कुल। आज की ये इंटरनेशनल वेबिनार में वाणी की वंदना इस हेतु कर रहा हूँ कि हमारी ये वेबिनार पूरी तरह से सफल हो। रोमा जी भी हमारे स्क्रीन, रोमा जी प्लीज, स्पीकर, हमारे पार्टिसिपेंट और हमारे जितने भी साथी जुड़े हुए हैं आज, इन सब की ओर से मैं वाणी से और सरस्वती से प्रार्थना करता हूँ कि हमारा कार्यक्रम, हमारा ये वेबिनार जो भारत से लेकर के और अमेरिका तक, सुदूर 7 समुद्र पार तक है, मैं चाहता हूँ कार्यक्रम हमारा सफलता से संपन्न हो। इसके लिए मैं माँ वीणा पाणी, माँ सरस्वती से आराधन करता हूँ, वंदना करता हूँ। वरदान दो, वरदायिनी वरदान दो, वरदायिनी वरदान दो, कलिमल हरण मंगल करण, माता ओ कमल निवासिनी, कलिमल हरण मंगल करण, माता ओ कमल निवासिनी, निज अंक में स्थान दो, निज अंक में स्थान दो, वरदायिनी वरदान दो, ज्योति से जलवा हो गया, तेरा जगत जगतारी, ज्योति से जलवा हो गया, तेरा जगत जगतारिणी जगतारिणी, निज अंक में स्थान दो, वरदायिनी वरदान दो, वरदायिनी। सभी सभी लोग म्यूट कर लें अपने आप को, कुछ आवाजें आ रही हैं पीछे से। इट इज रिक्वेस्टेड टू म्यूट, and also if you will close your video, then we will get a nice voice and nice coverage of the entire program. So it is requested to all the participants, please mute yourself and close the video at present. And when we will have the discussion, we will open the video as well as the sounds. कामिनी मैम, सभी लोग इन हो रहे हैं, हो गए हैं? आवाज नहीं आ रही आपकी, कामिनी मैम की आवाज नहीं आ रही। मुकेश जी, आवाज आ रही है?
Sir, I am waiting for 5 more minutes. Participants are checking.
आ रही है सर। ओके ओके, ठीक ठीक ठीक। Others are on YouTube and Facebook now.
Yes, yes, yes.
We are making this program live on YouTube and Facebook, so all of you can join at YouTube and Facebook also.
Anju Sharma ji, please stop presenting your screen. Anju Sharma ji.
चल रही है मुकेश जी जी सर फेसबुक चल रहा है ना सर प्रॉपर ठीक फेसबुक पे केवल आ रही है आगे नहीं बढ़ रहा आगे नहीं बढ़ रहा मतलब दूसरा भेजा तो केवल वो स्क्रीन आ रही है केवल वही जो डाली थी ईमेल करो मेरे को ईमेल अच्छा सिस्टम वेबिनार एपी देखो सिस्टम वेबिनार एपी पे मेल करो लिंक नया सिस्टम दे दिया फिर भेजा मुकेश जी सर जी मैंने ये अभी दोबारा लिंक भेजा है जरा इस पे जाइए दोबारा लिंक भेजा मैंने जी सर कनेक्ट हो गया जी आया नहीं अभी हाँ पूरा क्लियर नहीं है आ जाएगा मुकेश जी सर जी इस लिंक को शेयर कर दीजिए मैसेज में अच्छा टू मिनट्स मोर आफ्टर 2 minutes we can start है ना
Yes, sir.
नहीं लोगों को लिंक इन करिए ना तो बाद में फिर
Okay, sir. Okay. It is 5. Should I start?
Yes, we can start now.
Okay. Namaskar and good evening to all. I, Kamini Vishwakarma, on behalf of my entire team, welcome all the participants who have joined us from across the country and outside the country. I am very thankful to all of you for showing keen interest not only in participating in the webinar but also in contributing paper, videos, and PPT links. Thank you all for this overwhelming response. Now, I also welcome all the panelists of this session, Dr. Narendra Kumarustagi sir, who is Director in Center for Global Business Studies, School of Business, Harvard University, USA, Professor Adrian Bajpayee ji, renowned economist and educator in India, and also Dr. Ashutosh Priya, a great academician and soft skills trainer in India. I must say, all the panelists are great academicians and expert in their respective fields. Heartiest welcome to all of you. This international webinar on economic nationalism and globalization is organized by Wisdom About Society India in collaboration of International Educated Group USA. Now, without making much background, I would like to invite Dr. Ashutosh Priya to continue the webinar. But before I hand over to him, I would like to share some brief about him. He is reputed academician working in Department of Regional and Applied Economics in Bareilly. He is having wide experience combining teaching and industry. His wide management experience working in diverse capacities from head, dean, and director in reputed institutions have endowed him with skills requisites of top management in national and international spheres. He is a reputed trainer on soft skills and has trained many professionals in corporate field and faculty members and students in college. His exposure to solution in human resource enhancement through adequate and competent training is invaluable. So, welcome you, sir. Now, I am handing over to you, sir. Ashutosh, please, sir.
Thank you, Kamini. First of all, I'd like to welcome our renowned expert speaker, Professor N.K. Rastagi from Washington, USA. He is a director of an institute in University of Howard. And also we will have in a few while, I think after some time, maybe 15-20 minutes later, Professor Adrian Bajpayee with us, and he will join us for this valuable lecture. Now, I would like to discuss here, we have chosen the topic of economic nationalism because after COVID-19, this pandemic has created a lot of problems for each and every country, and lot of experiences, lot of bad experiences, and lot of learnings we are having due to this pandemic. Now, economic nationalism, whether it is essential or not, because if you talk about India in 1991, when Manmohan Singh has started the economic liberalization, globalization process in India, the openness of Indian economy, then we were thinking that if this is only the option by which we can be the power or we can be the best in the world. But again, after this pandemic, we are facing we are feeling lot of problems, we are facing lot of problems, and now we are thinking whether economic nationalism is important or the globalization is important. And when we were talking with Professor Rastagi to organize this international conference, we have discussed lot many topics, but finally we have decided that we should go for economic nationalism versus globalization. एंड व्हेन वी टॉक इकोनॉमिक नेशनलिज्म, इसको हम हिंदी में अगर कहें तो हम आर्थिक राष्ट्रवाद कहते हैं। और इस आर्थिक राष्ट्रवाद की जब बात आती है, every country is having some nationalism, and it is not always open for all the countries. Even if you talk about USA, the President Trump nowadays, he is talking about nationalism a lot. Earlier, the view was that the world should be like a global village, and everyone should have the access to each and every country, and we can transfer the things, we can transfer the technology, we can transfer the health services, we can transfer anything from this border to the next border. But again, this pandemic has created a lot of questions in our mind whether this economic nationalism is important or not. When we talk about nationalism, what nationalism is, or economic nationalism is that it is a body of policies. Body of policies emphasizing on domestic control of economy, land and the capital formation, especially the labor and land, labor and capital formation. If we are controlling all these three factors of production, then you will find out that this economic, the national economic nationalism will take place, where we are having the barriers. If you talk about the difference between the globalization and the economic nationalism, we will find out the difference. Like in economic nationalism, we are having the open, in globalization, we are having the open market. But when we talk about this economic nationalism, we promote the domestic markets. Similarly, free trade and barrier. In the globalization, we talk about the free trade, but in the economic nationalism, we talk about the barriers. Multilateral trade system in the globalization, one here inequality is there. When we talk about globalization, it is having the comparative advantage, and in the terms of economic nationalism, we are having the absolute gain. So all these things, in a nutshell, we can say that protection and restriction are the key for the economic nationalism. It is not only in terms of economics also, but you find out like the America, they were asking about the medicine of this coronavirus, hydrochloroquine or something like that. They have asked from India, and India has exported the things. And many people, many political parties of India, they have said no, we should not export. This is somewhere the Congress party in India, they were talking about the globalization most, but when we have exported the things, they have said, no, this is not good because we should look the interest of India first, the interest of our country first. So we have to think about it that whether we are going on a right path by adopting the globalization process, or we should think about the economic nationalism, or in other words, what we can say, it is not like the openness is not like that we are not thinking in terms of our safety. We have to have a policy. We have to think about over it that whether our policy is having a balance between mercantilism and protectionism. Mercantilism and protectionism, if combining together, what we can say that it is called economic nationalism. This is the brief introduction, or the idea about the economic nationalism versus globalization, and why we have chosen this topic at this particular time. But more light on this particular topic will be given by our renowned expert, Professor N.K. Rastagi. I would like to welcome him, sir. But are you ready for the presentation?
Yes, I am ready for the.
We are not getting the voice.
Yeah, yes, I am ready for the presentation.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
So before inviting you, I would like to request Dr. Ruchi Dovedi to present your brief introduction. So please welcome Professor Ruchi Dovedi. Dr. Ruchi. Dr. Ruchi. Hello.
Yeah, that's okay. We can go without it.
Professor of Center of Global Business Studies.
Hello.
Rastagi sir is professionally very active and dynamic personality. He was the co-author of the grant to start online programs at the Harvard University. He is co-founder of International Educators Group. Sir also participated in review of programs at the Koji State University, Nigeria, Sohar University, Oman, and University of Mauritius. Sir also addresses a lot of international conferences as keynote speaker. He was a keynote
Maybe I could start my presentation if that's okay.
Hello. Sir is. Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes. Yes. Yes, please. Hello. Okay, sir. My voice
Yeah.
is clear.
We are hearing you now.
Sir is very much passionate about developing. Sir is very much passionate about developing strategies for efficient delivery of higher education as well as promotion of the importance of pluralism for growth of society and businesses. Sir is just like a diamond. We are the.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, 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 we can hear.
Oh, okay. Good afternoon or good evening. I'm Narendra Rustagi. As Shrutiji introduced me at Howard University School of Business. Thank you very much for joining in the presentation. And as Dr. Ashutosh Priya said that the conflict between economic nationalism and globalization is gaining prominence, and it gained more prominence with the issue of refugees from various countries that had poured in into Europe, then events like Brexit, and now because of COVID, we have challenges as to how much dependence do we want to have on other countries, and especially as you look at the issue of stealing of technology. So the current challenges that we have right now is globalization and free competition, which we all know benefits all economies. But at the same time, if one country starts to dump cheap products to destroy companies in another country, then it's a different issue. And same thing about stealing of technology. And it's more so these days in reference to China. Now, stealing of technology has gone on forever. However, now, like for example, NSA chief in 2011 said that US companies are losing $338 billion due to theft. Overall, total cost is estimated to be between 225 to 600 billion. Another study put the theft at 1.8 trillion. So the expense is significant, and why that matters. So if you look at China GDP as a percentage of US GDP, it went from under 10% to close to 65%. If you look at it in purchasing power parity terms, the GDP is even more than the US GDP. So what is happening is that countries are facing challenges. Now, as Australian Foreign Minister put it, that they are exposed in an audacious global campaign to steal commercial secrets from them. And that essentially translates to them stealing food, from Australian families, because in essence, they are becoming less competitive because of the technology that is stolen. And so they're talking about having appropriate strategies in place. Now, stealing of technology has been going on forever, but it's getting more importance now as the competitiveness of the economy is going down. For example, Ferry in 2018 said that the Chinese espionage campaign is different. It's indifferent in what sense? In the sense that now it's starting to hurt the economy. And so a bipartisan pair of US senators introduced a legislation to require President Trump to systematically punish China for stealing technology. So that is something, when it comes to the economy, you have to then try to address the issue. Now, is it the first time that some country has done that? As we see, Trump is not alone, even though when he started talking about theft by China several years ago, he was probably the first one to talk so vehemently about it. U.S. government has been talking with China to address the issue, but he has brought it to the forefront. So now let's look at what's going on because China is having a lot of attention these days. So we are aware of the Belt and Road Initiative, under which they are trying to build relationships as well as trying to take control. And this is where the true challenge comes in. So when you look at this, the Silk Road came up long time ago, 206 BCE to 220 CE, somewhere there, and it passed through. Trade was essentially the objective. Even now, more than 60 countries have, signed up on the project. It's estimated that the overall expense could be 1.2 to 1.3 trillion dollars. What they're doing is giving low cost loans. So in a way, this is something like colonization. Rather than giving aid, which is what US had done, not to say that US did not benefit from the grants US government gave or aid that US government gave, but here it's taking direct control. We saw that in case of Malaysia. We saw the same thing in case of Sri Lanka. And it's this lack of transparency which is leading to companies not knowing what is happening. And then when that debt they cannot service, then China, rather than waiving the debt, they start to take control. For example, in case of Sri Lanka, they had to hand over their strategic port to Beijing because they couldn't pay the debt. So it's that colonization thing that is creating the problem. Now, when we talk about globalization, what is globalization? There are no clear-cut definitions, but broadly speaking, what we say is you have large-scale movement of individuals. And more recently, it occurred with industrialization in England. However, it has been going on forever. People have been, moving around as we saw, even with the earlier Silk Road movement by India. Now you even see evidence of Indians having gone to Australia, in ancient times. So the movement has always been there, and the size of population that moved depended on the circumstances. Same thing, economic nationalism. It's essentially looking after the interests of a country, or in a narrow sense, it may even could be a region that is trying to look for its own economic interests. So, do they go hand in hand, or you have to choose one over the other. So for that, we could look at how things happened in history. The globalization concept came up in Europe where they said, hey, you trade globally, the economy or the industry that is providing better service or better product by using various resources from all over the world, then everyone benefits. And theoretically, that sounds right. But did that actually happen? Or did we, or some countries created situations where they exploited others? So, and then that wasn't nationalism. So it was economic nationalism for the European countries. And because they had controlled markets in their colonies or areas controlled by them, they could say that they are making use of market forces. For example, British, controlled the trade from India, so Indian companies couldn't trade without their permission. So they had a captured market. They destroyed the loom industry in India, which was a thriving industry at the time. So, and then after that, they could say, hey, we are sourcing products because they are cheaper in India, and then we are supplying finished goods. But in other sense, it was controlled by them, so it wasn't really free competition. It was colonization and justifying the exploitation through globalization. So globalization in principle is good, but the way it came about. So let's go further and see what happened, how the growth in England. England was raided by Vikings in the 9th century. William the Conqueror took control. And then you see that there were periods when there were fundamentalism and the periods where there was tolerance. And you find that growth occurred during periods of tolerance. For example, Roger II, when he inherited the country of Sicily, fought wars using troops that were both Christians and Muslims. Scotland invited Normans and developed a pluralistic society. And, so on. So that is how the growth sort of occurred there. So you had England, absolute monarchy in 1500, Catholicism, the dominant religion, and where just like we talk about caste, they talked about how the class structure, three classes, priests, chivalry, and gentleman class, and then the rest for the commoners. And, at that time, priests pretty much ruled the show. So when you come to later period, on the 16th century, you find that there is a lot of migration, more tolerance, and there is growth. Later on, the Industrial Revolution started. And so it was, I'm not trying to read, you can read the slides and it'll be available anyway. So you find that during periods of tolerance, growth occurred. For example, during 1550 to 1650, grain production increased by almost 75% as they improved, better relationship, repealed hearsay laws, and, that kind of a thing. Similarly, when they needed labor for knowledge, they encouraged immigration, Dutch engineers to drain the land, improved techniques, etc. So it's not against immigration, but immigration of who? So people move for economic opportunities, and then same thing, the other countries have to balance their needs. And what you find is whenever there is tolerance, the growth occurs, and I'll touch on that in India's scenario as well. Another example, you find the cloth industry in England expanded with the help of refugees from Netherlands who were, running from religious wars there, and so on. So it is the tolerance of people, of course, in a limited way, and obtaining technology. Now, legally, that's great, but at times it was done illegally. And then that is where the balance has to be struck. The stealing of technology occurs within a country, between countries, with support of the government, without support of the government. And where that balance is, that's what we are looking at. When you look at what England had done over the period they controlled India, by one estimate, they took away equivalent of $45 trillion. As I briefly talked about, killing of the Indian industry, controlling shipping, taking control. So it was called globalization, but it, in essence, was a power to squeeze the maximum amount possible that they could do. Now, were they alone? 18th century US, when US was a developing economy, Alexander Hamilton, who on the one hand made the case for neither having monopolies or protecting companies from an unfair exposure to foreign companies, but he also argued for encouraging companies to obtain technology, legal, illegal, whatever. And if you got it in the country, you got control of the technology. Was it all, did it always stay the same? US had similar policies of expansionist strategies to control rest of the world. And I'll just read this quote from a speech of US Senator in January 1900. We will not renounce our part in the mission of our race, trustee under God of the civilization of the world, and we will move forward to our work, not hauling our regrets like slaves whipped to their burden, but with gratitude for a task worthy of our strength, and thanks to Almighty that He has marked us as His chosen people, henceforth to lead in the regeneration of the world. And that's where US was taking control of other countries. Now, after World War II, when competition came with Soviet Union, the policy changed. A country could request American assistance and aid if the country was being threatened by armed aggression from another state. So in a short period of 50 years, you see a shift because of the competition, just like it had happened in England. Other countries did the same thing. Danish-Norwegian policy in late 18th century, when England had superior technology for glass, and migration of skilled individuals was illegal from England. They tried to bring them in to obtain the glass technology. So it's not that it didn't happen in the world, it always did. Now let's look at the growth in India in a similar setting. In India, we don't know how the growth occurred in the ancient times, but we do know the recorded history from decline. If you look at GDP, look at the Indian GDP, which in 1 AD was roughly 1/3 of the world's GDP. Even up until 1700s, when the British came, we had 23-24% of the GDP. And then it came down all the way to below 4% after independence, as the squeeze that we just talked about, the loot, you can say, by the British of the uh, Indian technology as well as India as such by controlling the borders of India and exploiting by using India as a market for their products, where they charged exorbitant prices for things that they did, for example, railways. So, how did we lose over time? You know, because of foreign aggression, our knowledge base was destroyed. Same thing happened, for example, in Baghdad. You lost knowledge base because of foreign aggressors who didn't value the knowledge base. Now, how could we lose if we had superior metal technology, superior shipping? Just like you can see it happened in Britain. Since World War II, for the first time, Navy is without an aircraft carrier. France, Paris terror attacks in 2015. They needed to borrow from US Army. In US, a concern that if a war broke out, US may or may not be able to win if it is in the Pacific theater. So if we not focus on constant development and technology and not protect our technology, you could lose. Now, in the context of India, I wanted to bring it that pluralism, in my opinion, creates an environment for growth of new knowledge. And, I give some small examples. You're probably aware UNESCO Airbus competition, where they have their Fly Your Ideas competition. You find that grand prize winners, earlier we had few, but in 2015, India had an entry, but it will be clearer if you look at, for example, the NASA Space Settlement Contest, 1996 to 2006. India was nowhere, 7 to 17. India had 4 grand prize winners. Similarly, if you look at the first, second, and third place winners and honorary mentions in various grade levels, you find India going from almost nothing to a much larger number. So that shows that the social structure that we have does create an environment wherein you grow the knowledge base. Same thing about migration. Now, in democracies, politicians are always focused on them winning or the party winning and take positions accordingly. Democratic Party, which deported aliens during their regime, is strongly opposed to it now. In fact, all kinds of deportations are considered illegal. Some cities have even called themselves sanctuary cities and would not work with the federal government. India is facing similar challenges. You know more about that than I. As we deal with illegal migrants. Now, how do you deal with who came, how long ago, and then where is your humanitarian ground? So that is something the country has to balance. But the challenges are there. So while migration in general of technology pool, that is individuals who add value, that always helps, and so does diversity. But at the same time, can you lose out of the economic base if that it starts to hurt? So if you look at migration, for example, I looked at the state level GDP and migration, and you find that there is a very strong correlation between state level GDP, this is India data, state level GDP and migration for business. So it's always helpful. You always have to strike a balance. And as we talk about globalization, migration is just as important part of it. So as Dr. Ashutosh Priya introduced the conference idea, the globalization and economic nationalism, including migration, it's complementary or competitive, depends on the context and our underlying philosophy. If the exploitation by one country doesn't stop, as we see the stealing of technology, especially when it's supported by the state, while on the surface the state says that they recognize intellectual property rights, that's where the confusion comes, and then global alliances would have to be formed, especially when you find the survival at times, for example, in this pandemic times, when there was a shortage or the quality of protective equipment that were supplied were not of quality, the countries would have to maintain, develop supply chain, reliable supply chains where the important things that protect the citizens are available. They protect the technology. So you develop policies so that the technology is not stolen or shared with countries that you support. And because of that kind of exploitation, you see various countries have come up with strategies to reduce their reliance on the exploiter, in this case China. For example, Japan is creating fund to move production out of China. India obviously is working to facilitate the entry. Similarly, as we are seeing, if companies exploit to the fullest, which is what they would want to do, unless they are forced by national governments or internationally alliances to share, say, for example, vaccines in this case, at an appropriate price as and when they come. Should those alliances be based on democratic values, for example, of tolerance, pluralism, whatever that would be, that is something we all would have to decide, because we also see that countries talk about, for example, democratic values and then support intolerant regimes. This would, be more important as we go. Hydrochloroquine was talked about, whatever share of the production efficiencies adds value, but you have to have the availability. So whether we do that through alliances, bilateral alliances, multilateral alliances, whichever way, and that is the stage we are at, where we are struggling to define define those. And obviously, one has to see how they could have a technology at home. For example, China was able to build a factory to manufacture masks in 6 days, and we in the US were still, struggling with getting the mask and protective equipment available even for the physicians in the initial round of the crisis. So that is essentially what I have. Thank you very much.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, hello.
Yeah. Sir, thanks for your presentation. Now, if anybody from the participant would like to ask any question, anybody, or would like to say something, I see that Professor NL Sharma is with us. NL Sharma sir, सुन रहे हैं मेरे को आप? Hello, Dr. NL Sharma. Hello. Hello. Dr. Vivek, you are getting my voice? हेलो प्लीज अपने माइक म्यूट कर लीजिए. कुछ लोगों ने माइक खोल दिए हैं, म्यूट कर दीजिए. नवीन शुक्ला जी, अपने माइक को बंद कर लीजिए. नवीन शुक्ला जी, हाँ, यस प्लीज, थैंक यू. हेलो डॉक्टर प्रोफेसर रस्तगी, यू आर
Yeah,
listening?
yeah,
Hello, Professor, you are getting sound of mine?
yeah, I'm listening.
Okay. Any would like one question I want to talk. Okay. नवीन शुक्ला जी, आप क्वेश्चन पूछिए तब तक. नवीन शुक्ला जी.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, uh, I want to ask the question that how economic nationalism is beneficial for developing countries like Bharat in this COVID-19 era, as we are not fully able to produce the medical facilities in totality. This is my question.
Thank you. I agree with you that, you can't really go and say, hey, we just, if you are not able to produce, we have to import. As you know, right now, we are dependent on China, even for the ingredients for hydrochloroquine, for example. So that is what I was talking about, that we have to have reliable partners where we can, talk about, how we would be addressing the need of the country. So we have to have protective equipment. So whether we produce it at home or import it, for now, we may have to continue importing from China or wherever, just like the US did, until we build our capacity. And like, for example, what India did was very innovative when we converted uh, railways into hospital beds if needed. And we should be able to also set up factories sooner to produce personal protective equipment, and which should be the case for every country. And I agree that we have to reduce our dependence, but at the same time benefit from economies that arise as we collaborate with countries elsewhere, whether we do it, with countries that we don't share values with. We would never share all values. We would share some values, and we have to find that balance. But if you find that in the process your technology is stolen and your economy hurts, then you have to back off. You see, for example, the concept of globalization came, and so did the protection of technology, was to benefit the society. Now, at that point, 50 years of protection may have been very good or appropriate. Today, when companies are able to, make money in a shorter period of time, should that be shorter? In cases, for example, for medication for COVID, should it be that long, or should the government come in and decide how much the compensation should be for something like that? So that balance is something every country has to strike. And so that is where, I think development of appropriate policy would lie, whether we produce it at home or we import it. As you know, when it's cheaper to import, people would import it, legally or illegally. As you saw 30, 40 years ago about cars, when, in India, policies were that bad that you could import all parts of a car that was cheaper than importing a car. So, you would be doing that. So it is that balance that the government has to strike between nationalism and globalization. As I said, the two go hand in hand, and it just depends on how we would want to address the issue. I don't know if I answered your question. Hello?
No, sir, it's a real answer. I think we have to work together. The balance which you have talked about earlier.
Yeah.
It is only the way to make a balance between this for the developing countries like Bharat and all that. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot.
Other question from any participant, please raise your hand or write a message in the chat box. Any other person would like to ask anything? Any question from Professor Rastagi? Hello. Professor Rastagi, you are getting my voice?
Yeah, I'm hearing you.
Yes. I would like to ask one question. As you are seeing the policy of America also, what is your opinion? Whether this US is also thinking about the economic nationalism more now? They are less globalized now. They are trying to preserve their economy with these policies, like they are not allowing the people to come to US more, and they are trying to protect their industry more. What is your opinion about it?
You know, as I said, politicians always look at the politics of it. So that's where this thing about illegal migration comes in. Democrats, during a democratic regime of President Obama, people were deported. Trump has just made that as an election issue. Now, is his policy of controlling people who are coming on H1? I think it's not right, because to me it doesn't make sense that on the one hand, anyone who comes from our southern border, once they enter, then we are giving them all kinds of protections. While if you're flying in from JFK, then you go through the immigration process. And it takes so long to process paperwork, while the individuals who are on H1 are adding value to the society. So it is there that I think the government would have to venture in. Otherwise, you would see the talent pool that was coming to the US, is going to Australia, is going to Canada. And there are studies, I don't remember the exact amount that was quoted in that study, about the value of H-1Bs to the US economy. So I'm not in for illegal migration. I am for legal migration, but in support of the people who are bringing in technology or for humanitarian reasons, as I said, but that's a balance we have to strike as to how much. And if you look at the US migration policy, or for that matter, almost of any country, it's always dependent on a balance between humanitarian reasons as well as economic reasons that we bring people in. And, at times it was based on race. In the US, for example, uh, they had policies against migrants from China, and then, South Africa had it wherever they could take control of it, of one race over the other, or against one race, and so on, that US did. So that is absolutely wrong, and it hurts the economy. I didn't go more on into the pluralism aspect of it, but my other study, which I had done, clearly shows that the growth occurred during periods of tolerance. Whether it's India, whether it's Middle East, whether it's US, whether it's Britain. Of course, the exploitation by taking control is another issue. Like Britain stole 45 billion from US, and then the human toll. Like, for example, food was being exported from Bengal while there was a drought in Bengal. So it's there. But in terms of migration, I support legal migration, and I do not support the U.S. government policy of restricting migration period, just like we did a short while ago. So it should be based on logic and how much value it's adding to the economy. Of course, politicians also have to see how they would implement a particular thing, and for that they have to win elections and so on. So individuals strike that balance. Hope that may make some sense.
Okay, Professor Rastagi, thank you very much. And in between, Professor A.D.N. Vajpayee, he has joined us. So I would like to welcome Professor Vajpayee. Professor Vajpayee, you are getting the sound? Professor Vajpayee, you are getting the sound? Hello? Yes, I am getting the sound. Okay. Professor Rastagi will be with us up to the end of the seminar, and in the last we will have the question answer session. But in between, we are having our renowned speaker and the great academician of India, Professor A.D.N. Vajpayee, with us, and he will throw the light on this economic nationalism. As Professor Rastagi has said, it is always beneficial economic nationalism, but we have to have the balance between the economic nationalism and the globalization. And now, with the point of view, because he is from the Howard University, USA, he is having the idea of the US policy and other things. And now we are having the academician and the great thinker from India who is having great knowledge about this particular topic. I would like to welcome Professor Vajpayee here in our webinar, international webinar. And I would like to request Dr. Mukesh Sharma to introduce himself. And after that, Professor Vajpayee will start his lecture. Thank you. धन्यवाद सर. मैं डॉक्टर मुकेश शर्मा. जैसा कि हमारे अतिथि यहाँ डॉक्टर रस्तगी सर हैं, वही प्रोफेसर एन वाजपेयी जी, प्राध्यापक अरुण दिवाकर नाथ वाजपेयी, आचार्य अर्थशास्त्र रानी दुर्गावती विश्वविद्यालय जबलपुर मध्य प्रदेश। आप कुल सचिव हिमाचल प्रदेश विश्वविद्यालय समरहिल ज्ञानपथ शिमला, कुलपति अवधेश प्रताप सिंह विश्वविद्यालय रीवा, कुलपति महात्मा गांधी चित्रकूट, ग्रामोदय विश्वविद्यालय चित्रकूट। इसके अलावा अनेक सर्च कमेटी के सदस्य, अनेक प्रबंध परिषदों के सदस्य, पुर्तगाल, साउथ अफ्रीका, कीनिया आदि देशों में भारतीय प्रतिनिधित्व के रूप में, ऑक्सफोर्ड, यूके, कैम्ब्रिज, लंदन, घाना, साउथ अफ्रीका, कीनिया, नैरोबी, बैंकॉक, थाईलैंड, लिस्बन, पुर्तगाल आदि देशों में शैक्षिक भ्रमण के रूप में, संपादक, संरक्षक, विशेषज्ञ, लगभग 300 से भी अधिक व्याख्यान विभिन्न संस्थाओं में और विश्वविद्यालयों में, ज्ञान से वैदिक संपदा की ओर, आधुनिक कला, दर्शन विज्ञान, आध्यात्मिक आदि पर। इसके अतिरिक्त दर्जनों व्याख्यान दीक्षांत समारोह और स्थापना दिवस पर, पुरस्कार के रूप में गुरु वशिष्ठ सम्मान, विवेकानंद सेवा अलंकरण, विश्व हिंदी सेवा सम्मान, साहित्य शिरोमणि जैसे अर्धशतक से भी अधिक सम्मान आपके हाथ हैं। थिंक टैंक के रूप में सूर्या फाउंडेशन, केंद्रीय विद्यालय संगठन में एचआरडी के द्वारा आप सदस्य, एसवाई कुरैशी मुख्य चुनाव आयुक्त, राष्ट्रपति प्रणब मुखर्जी, उपराष्ट्रपति हामिद अंसारी, मुख्य न्यायाधीश टी एस ठाकुर, प्रोफेसर प्रेम कुमार धूमिल, मुख्यमंत्री हिमाचल प्रदेश, दलाई लामा आदि जैसी महान हस्तियों के साथ आपका व्याख्यान रहा है। अनेक जर्नल्स, न्यूज़लेटर आदि के आप संपादक रहे हैं। आप अर्थशास्त्री हैं। पिछले 8 वर्षों तक व्याख्याता, 20 वर्षों से अधिक आचार्य के पद पर, अनेक पुस्तकें आपकी और प्रोजेक्ट हैं। आपने लगभग 13 एमए डिसर्टेशन कराई है, वहीं 25 एमफिल और 29 पीएचडी अवार्ड कराई हैं आपने। आपकी 11 पुस्तकें, 20 संपादन, 10 प्रबंध ग्रंथ हैं, 23 आपके एडिटेड वॉल्यूम पेपर हैं, के आपके, और 35 इंटरनेशनल कॉन्फ्रेंस में आपने अंतर्राष्ट्रीय संगोष्ठियों में सहभागिता की है। साहित्यिक क्षेत्र में आपने अरुण सतसई के रूप में, जैसे कि बिहारी सतसई है, उसी के मद्देनजर रखते हुए अरुण सतसई, वही प्रयोगात्मक अध्ययन, वेदांत, आध्यात्मिक, राष्ट्रवाद, काम की सूक्ष्मताएं, वदतु संस्कृति भवतु संस्कृति, ऐसे प्रबंध का एकात्म मानववाद पर नानाजी देशमुख का समग्र 150वीं जयंती महात्मा गांधी, वहीं पटेल वारसा आदि पर शोध पत्र। कुल हम अगर अतिशोक्ति न कहें तो इसको ऐसे कह सकते हैं, कल जब हमारी टीम एक शेड्यूल बना रही थी तो उसमें एडीएन वाजपेयी की जगह एएनडी वाजपेयी हो गया सर, तो लगा एंड। मैंने कहा ये एंड को अगर हम सकारात्मक रूप से जोड़े अगर, तो एंड का मतलब होता है और जहां वाजपेयी के साथ और जुड़ता चला जाए, लगता है कि शायद है वो कभी पूर्ण होगा ही नहीं, और इस अपूर्णता में ही मैं समझता हूँ शायद है प्रोफेसर एडीएन वाजपेयी जुड़े हुए हैं, जो हमेशा उनके साथ और जुड़ता रहेगा। और अगर मैं कहूँ तो कल सर जब आपका सीवी में सर्च कर रहा था तो ये अतिशयोक्ति नहीं है कि मैं सर्च करते करते यूं कहें कि मोबाइल की स्क्रीन पिचक गई, बिन उंगलियां थक गई। शायद है कोई अगर शोध पत्र लिखता है, कोई अगर थीसिस लिखेगा सर, तो शायद है उसके पेज कम पड़ जाएंगे जितना आपका सीवी है। मैं समझता हूँ अगला कोई अगर एक पीएचडी की जाए तो वो कृतित्व और व्यक्तित्व तो प्रोफेसर एडीएन वाजपेयी पर की जाए, तो शायद है आपका सारा डाटा ही अगर दे दिया जाए सन 2018, 2020, 21, 22 ऐसे करके देखे तो सर उसमें इतना कुछ लिखा पड़ा है कि शायद है पढ़ते पढ़ते थक जाएंगे। अंत में मैं सर आपको प्रणाम करते हुए, आपका निवेदन करते हुए एक बात जरूर कहना चाहता हूँ। मुझे पता है आप बहुत अच्छे साहित्यकार हैं, आप कवि भी हैं, कवि हृदय हैं, कि सारा जीवन हम जैसों का आपका एक कोना हो जाए, सारा जीवन हम जैसों का आपका एक कोना हो जाए, पारस मणि आप छूले जिसको सोना हो जाए, प्रज्ञा भरा प्रवाह हिलोरे जब भी मारे, एक ज्ञान का उदय महासागर होना हो जाए। ऐसे हैं सर एडीएन वाजपेयी जी। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। आज हमारे बीच हैं आप, ये हम सबका सौभाग्य है। आदरणीय सर, प्लीज स्टार्ट द प्रोसेस।
आशुतोष जी, आपको बहुत बहुत नमस्कार, धन्यवाद। प्रोफेसर रस्तोगी जी का एक अच्छा उद्बोधन यहाँ पे हो रहा था, सुनना भी चाह रहा था, लेकिन आई वाज बिजी इन दैट टू सीक्वेंशियल इसी वेबिनार। मुकेश जी, आपको इस प्रकार से धन्यवाद है, आपको शुभकामनाएं, आशीर्वाद। आप तो परिश्रम करने में जो कष्ट हुआ उसके लिए मैं क्षमा देता हूं। ऐसा कुछ खास हो नहीं पाया अभी तक। चाह रहा हूँ कुछ ऐसा करूं कि जो बिना परिश्रम के भी आपके पास पहुंच जाए जहाँ बैठे ये बात है। हाउ ये जो विषय रखा है आज तो आपने और आपके साथ लोग और जुड़े हुए हैं, आप पहले संस्थान के निदेशक, आपके जो और सहकर्मी हैं, ये विषय बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण विषय है। प्रोफेसर रस्तोगी, they are doing justice from the angle other than Indian or Western angle or American angle about I'll be speaking on my own issue point of view, and I think both will be joining on conceptual point of view. When he was saying that there should be logic and either reversal of globalization or nationalization or combination, logic is in the root of all it. Logic is not there, then I think problem. One thing that any behavior based upon immediate problem, crisis-based behavior, cannot be treated as a sustainable or eternal behavior. Because some situations which occur, it's a history like that. Ups and downs, cyclical fluctuation, are the characteristics of time. From them only we try to optimize, learn certain, try to normalize behavior. The very first thing I would like to ask all of you, that it is very big world, big economic world we had created in the past, that is 2.5 centuries. Was a real world or it's an artificial world? If it's an artificial world, created world, by exploiting the nature, by exploiting the human population, by exploiting the colonial country, and by exploiting the entire environment, weather, climate. If you have seen accumulated out of proportion wealth with you, that too for your own consumption, that too for your conspicuous consumption, that too for your admiration, that too for the domination, can be called as a human nature or anything related with the humanity. Let me take an account of the data world over. I think Professor Sogi must have presented the skewness of the world development structure. We are having about more than 200 countries in the world. Out of 195 are hooked with United Nations. We are having as many as 54 countries from Africa, 48 from Asia, 44 from Europe, 33 from Latin America, Caribbean, 14 Oceania, and 2 from Africa. This is the structure so far as quantum of the countries are concerned. And we are having about 717 crore population of the world as such, an area is also 510 billion square kilometers area of the globe as of this in holistic format. And more than $95 billion is the world economy. But how has it been generated? That's a matter of great concern. And we see the distribution of population areas world over. We find about 15 countries of the world has about 72% of population. And about 11 countries have got 57% of area. And these countries like which we call the G20 countries, they have about 90% of the total GDP. Meaning that the 90% gross domestic product of the world is being generated or accumulated or concentrated in the boundaries, the population, the area occupied by the remaining 10% by 175. And any norms of the humanity tolerate this type of one day or the other. Either way, by way of your the combination of arms and ammunition, defense, your power, military power, or by your knowledge power, I think knowledge power also, or the world trade which we was talking about international trade, or by way of these Bretton Woods institutions, or World Bank and or by of United Nations, or many other state organizations like WTO, they are imposing several conditions on these poor developing nations. And that too, which are favoring your economy, favoring your employment, favoring your wealth generation, favoring your environment control also. Those policies we have been adopting long term. What do you think that this globalization, the market economy, opening a market economy, and well before it, the World Bank came out with this concept of market-friendly approach on this our 9th plan formulated, where the originated by the Indian or the small country behind it? No, not at all. Indian economy, I am taking an example, the case of India. India adopted the policy of this economy when it was independent. And means economy means public sector and private sector both together. And after a certain point of time, the public sector will obtain its economic height because they are providing welfare, they are providing capital, they are providing growth, they are providing social justice, they are providing employment, they are creating the big infrastructure, they are creating demand for the economy. But I see there were certain weaknesses in the creation of public sector. In the name of public sector, funds are going to public sector, but they were just being siphoned off to the private sector only because this public sector is also depending upon so many private industries, private entrepreneurs. They were just subletting the jobs for these private entrepreneurs, and much of the resources going in to the private. The private sector was getting important, the public sector was weakening. And at one particular time, it was said that public sector is inefficient. Their capital output ratio is much lower than that of the private sector investment. They are not able to generate employment also which is required. Their products are not internationally compatible. There is a lot of the time lag between investment and the output generation assets. So we should go for this side. Moreover, in world also, things will be bipolar. We all know that there are unipolar and during 1994. The Soviet model was failed. And Fukuyama wrote enough history that history of communism has vanished. Now the only capitalism and capitalism shall be. Actually, India too adopted the policies of Western world which is based on trickle down or population. India could never thought of taking uh, those elements which India possesses on its own. Maybe that particular society, which I call it larger society, exists in today's existence, not in the international world. Had India taken that particular policy, introspecting the structure and the culture of Indian economy, and a model would have developed which was based upon deconcentration, decentralization. I'm not saying that it should be village oriented or district oriented. If a widely distributed mechanism, whether it is of industries or it is companies or it is administration or it is police or it is judiciary like that, I'm taking all in one go. So things which we are witnessing today, that is reversal of migration or 4.4% going from cities to their own villages. This particular flight people are not because there could have been some flight.
यूट्यूब लाइव अच्छा अच्छा ओके 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 ओ सॉरी हो सकता है कि मैंने अपने लिए आवाज बंद की तो इज इट बेटर नाउ ओके सॉरी मैंने मैंने म्यूट किया था मुझे लगा मैं अपने लिए सॉरी
economic displacement, many sectors, all the economies of the world should optimize candidates for the resources, maybe human resources, history, education, scientific, manpower, and finance, and other resources and resources in generated matter, agriculture, land resources, mineral resources, water resources, all sectors are generated by the land
Yeah. One second. Now, Professor Vajpayee, you have stated it very well. I think you make the point very well as to how India should be addressing it. So I'll leave it there, but I think you would probably have more questions from the audience, and I think we can go from them. हाँ हाँ एकदम पक्का.
गाँव में खेती किसानी करनी है, हम बैंक की जगह हम ट्रैक्टर ले आए। ट्रैक्टर एक छोटा सा कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं आ सकता है।
हाँ जी. Could you repeat the question? No, I mean, I somehow believe that they are not, because in the process, whatever you are producing, you would have to identify your core competencies and then try to benefit from it. जैसे वाजपेयी जी ने भी थोड़ी देर पहले बोला कि जब भी आप राष्ट्रवाद की भी जैसे बात करते हैं, तो उसके साथ आप जिस भी दूसरे राष्ट्र के साथ आपको संबंध बनाने की आवश्यकता है वो आप बनाएंगे, राइट। और जहां पे आपकी कोर कॉम्पिटेंसीज हैं और जहां पे दूसरे की कोर कॉम्पिटेंसीज हैं, उनको आप मिला के दोनों को के फायदे के लिए आप प्रोडक्ट बनाएंगे। बट एट द सेम टाइम यू वुड वांट टू मेक श्योर कि भाई आप ओवर डिपेंडेंट नहीं हो जाते हैं। तो उसमें जैसे एक अभी थोड़ी देर पहले प्रश्न पूछा कि भाई अगर हम अपने लिए ही बना सकते हैं तो फिर हम एक्सपोर्ट नहीं करेंगे, एंड विच इज द राइट स्ट्रेटजी, unless of course you want to share some of it, but or increase your capacity. And that is where I was, if China could, for example, develop personal protective equipment factory in 6 days, then why should we not be able to do? And in that case, could we have collaborated and setting that up so that we have the appropriate production level? So I believe the two are complementary uh, as we build appropriate alliances. Thank you. Thank you.
So, and in future also, we would like to associate with you, the
Sure.
organization of yours.
Absolutely.
Maybe we will take the help of communication with you.
Sure.
And also, you, our mentor, our renowned academician, you can be a great thinker. Whatever factors are there, I would like to thank Dr. Renian Bhatt. मैं तो वो लोग हमारे सबसे
Thank you. Romaji, pleasure. Thank you. Namaskar. Thank you. And in the end, I would like to thank Dr. Ashutosh Priya for an excellent organization. Very, very great team. Thank you.
I'm also thankful to our people for organizing this event.
Thank you.